Hey, Jim Toscano here, and welcome to the Monday night live stream Filling in the Grooves, episode 95. Oh my goodness! So it's been really quite a trip doing these podcasts and these episodes and interviews, and interviewing a lot of my heroes throughout my life, which has been amazing. And so we're up to episode 95, and we're booked all the way through into starting July now. So 100 plus episodes booked. The 100th episode will be back to my first three, which will be David Garibaldi, Stanton Moore, and Dave Weckl all in the same episode on Memorial Day. So that should be pretty interesting, having those guys on together. And by the way, I just saw Dave Weckl a week ago at Lincoln Center for the Chick Corea tribute show, which was amazing. It was just a beautiful tribute to Chick. And so I just wanted to mention that. And I also want to mention some companies: Vader Drumsticks, Prologix, Percussion for all my lovely practice pads, Offset Pedals, Sabian Cymbals, Black Magic Designs for all the electronic stuff. And one more thing, Bernard Purdy will be on the show next week, so that is going to be super fun. Tune in for that. And then I have lots of business episodes coming up where I'm going to basically talk business skills for drummers with an accountant, a lawyer, a business coach, a technology guy from Black Magic Designs. So trying to bring some things that will hopefully educate you and enlighten you on some topics besides drumming, right? Some of the business stuff that we need as drummers. So I want to get into it. My guest tonight, I feel like looking through his discography that it was the soundtrack of like my early teens. It's like every record in the beginning of this man's career was really being played on my turntable and my 8-track player, dating myself right there. And so my
You're
guest,
dating me too.
nice. My
Watch
guest,
it.
yeah, that's right. My guest tonight played, on Bitches Brew with Miles Davis, Red Clay from Freddie Hubbard, which is amazing. Return to Forever, Jaco Pastorius. He's a producer, a composer, an educator, and a legendary drummer. My guest tonight, the amazing and legendary Lenny White. Lenny, thanks for being here, man. And
Thank you.
fellow New Yorker, I will add. You grew up in Queens, I believe, right?
Yes, Jamaica, Queens. Yes.
And I grew up in Brooklyn, so we weren't that far from each other.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
no problem, man. No
And
problem.
man, I want to dig into your story, but I kind of want to know before we get into sort of going back, what's happening these days. You and I off camera were just talking about that you composed a percussion ensemble piece and some other pieces for NYU, for the music college there, and you're also teaching at the New School. But speak to the composing that you're doing, which I found really interesting. That you're doing a percussion ensemble piece as well.
Well, what happened? It's not that it was an effect of COVID, but excuse me. I've been writing concert music for the past 20 years. And I got to a point and I thought it was great. And I played it for a few people and they said, "Oh, wow, this is pretty good." Yeah. And that's where it was. But when COVID happened, being a musician was quite a challenge because there were no gigs. I mean, there were no gigs for anybody.
Right.
I mean, Herbie Hancock didn't have a gig.
Yeah.
Ron Carter didn't have a gig. I mean, so people had a gig all the time, And so my purpose changed. And, I'm a musician. So I had to do something that was definitely related to music. And so if I could not practice to play or have a goal to, get myself together to go out and do this tour or these few gigs. What am I going to do?
Right.
And so I said, man, I'm going to go start and listen to some of these other pieces that I've done. And then I got the bug to try to write some new music, given all of the things that I was experiencing, not being able to play and changing my perspective and purpose. So I started writing some concert music. And I wrote two pieces. I was actually reading a book at that time that really inspired me. It's called Cast by uh, Elizabeth Wilkinson. And the information that was in this book inspired some music out of me. And it was interesting because, I had these two pieces that I was working on. Before COVID happened, I had done a talk at NYU. And, in my talking about my career and what I've been doing, what I had done with teachers, I mentioned that I had started to, I had attempted to write an opera. And it was taking quite some time because I could not get the libretto right. I had some people who tried, but it's not like writing a song.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's a whole involved thing. So I had gotten in a snag, and so in that snag, I had started just to write concert music. I didn't uh, go back to that, but I just started to write concert music, and so I had a bunch of things. Excuse me, and I spoke about it. And when the talk was over, the head of the percussion department came up to me and said, "I would like to hear your opera." That was very interesting. And no one had come to me and asked me about that had any credibility or something. So I said, "Really?" Anyway, I didn't hear from him for about a month. I said, "Yeah, well, see, that's what usually happens. Somebody says something and then they don't show up, or they don't follow up." I said, "Yeah, right, okay." Then he followed up
Wow.
and he said, "Listen, man, I'd really like to hear your music. Can you make me a reel of some things?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I sent him a reel, and he sent it around to some of the people, some of the people in the um, classical department at NYU, in the orchestra. And then they came back to me and said, "We really like your music, and we'd like to do some." And I'm like, "Really? Wow." And it was such a great uplift. I mean, because everybody has a arc that they continue on their career,
Right.
and so like this was a big step, man. I was like, whoa, somebody heard my music and likes it, and now they're asking me to really orchestrate it, and it's going to be done by a real orchestra, not just me messing with synths.
Right. Right. Oh my
It
God.
became a real interesting thing. And in going to rehearsals, um, it was deep because in both things, in the percussion ensemble and in the two orchestra pieces, you know, I spent a year and a half almost in my lab here, say, "Oh, that sounds pretty good," but you don't know until you give it to people and they really play it,
Right.
and
Right.
then you listen back and say, "Man, that sounds pretty good." Wow. And so I was totally geeked in hearing in rehearsals, hearing the music that I had written. And it meant something and it sounded really good. So I mean, and I'm
Man.
still inspired. I also, the head of the department is a timpani player,
Oh, okay.
and he approached me with a challenge. He said, "I really, I like what you do. I like your compositional skills, and I'd like you to write me a hip hop timpani piece."
Oh, wow.
I said, "Jonathan, that's almost like an oxymoron. I mean, like it's." He said, "Yeah, I know, but I think that you could do it." And so I did, and I got a friend of mine who pretty good rapper, and we got the orchestra to record, these parts that I had written, and Jonathan played this. I listened to a lot of um, timpani in some real great classical pieces, even to the point where there were timpani concertos. And I listened to it just to find the range of what the timpani can do and how the timpani is usually used. And I ran it by Jonathan because that's what he does, And he said, "Oh no, this is really good. This is really good. I mean, and I could really feel good about playing it." And so we're in the throes now of getting a final mix of that, which is really
Wow.
good too.
So,
So
is there a drum kit part happening with all of this orchestration stuff, or is no drum kit involved?
with the percussion ensemble, there's two drum kits.
Cool.
It's a bigger drum kit and then like a jazz drum kit. The percussion ensemble is for 17 pieces,
Nice. Oh, wow.
all percussion, lot of mallet stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of the concert music, it's not a drum kit.
Right.
It's percussion section.
I was
You know.
referring to the hip hop timpani piece. I just wondered if you were
No, I,
augmenting.
you
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
I did? No, no, no. What I did, in order for it to be true hip hop to me, you got to use samples. You have to use loops.
Nice.
So there's a loop, but then all the other stuff around it. There's an orchestra and timpani, real timpani that was performed live as
Wow.
we did it. You know,
Oh, that's
and
so
and
fun.
Jonathan is geeked. I mean, if he's been involved with a whole bunch of other kinds of musics all his life, and he's a contractor for orchestras and things.
Right.
He was the one that needed to be impressed, and he was impressed. He said, "Oh no, this is great." So I did my job.
Oh,
You know.
man. Man, it's so, we have to just to step back. Like everybody was talking about during, COVID having to pivot and,
Yeah.
change direction, right? And everybody and as I told you before, I was doing the tech thing with all these different guys and everybody lost their gigs, right? Um,
That's what I'm saying, right?
and it's like,
You have to. Your purpose is totally changed.
yeah,
Now you have to find a new purpose.
like overnight. But
Right.
the people that pivoted well and went with it and put their energy and their creativity right to use, came out on the other side better for it. And then there's some folks that just, kind of lost the wind in their wings there and just like stopped for a while. But all the guys that were like, because I was doing the tech thing and helping people to teach
Mm-hmm.
online. So all the guys that were reaching out right away to get their online teaching thing happening were right in the game. And believe it or not, I have guys still calling me, to this day going like, "Hey man, I want to try to get the online teaching thing together." And I'm like,
So I know that you were working with David
"Yeah, yeah.
because I saw David's transition in
Yeah,
doing that too.
right.
So I mean, for me, I do it online. I do it online in my classes in school,
Right.
and for that, maybe 8 months or whatever it was, I didn't really like it.
Yeah.
I didn't like it because, one of the things about being a musician, art usually does well when people congregate to
Indeed.
experience it. And we congregate to do everything. We congregate to worship,
Yeah.
we congregate to have opinions about different things, we congregate to share art. So when that was cut out, we kind of lost a great deal of humanity.
Yeah.
And so when going back on, I didn't do that many live streams playing wise
Right.
because I did a few, but I couldn't I couldn't get back the reciprocal energy
Right.
that I get when I'm in a room and I give the energy to the audience and they give that back to you. And that's what is the impetus to when you create and really want to play.
Yeah.
And without that, eh,
It's a weird
then
feeling.
it's like you practicing or whatever.
Right.
Hey,
Isn't it a
hey
weird
man,
like
let's get together, play some tunes, man. Come on.
like think of the first live stream that you did. Like for me, I started live streaming before COVID, but I was doing sort of a drum live stream. And I remember the first couple, I did have a guy in here who was a student of mine running the board and changing cameras for me. So I had him to bounce off of a little bit. But then when COVID hit, he didn't come anymore. So I was in here by myself playing and talking to nobody. And that's a weird feeling, right? You're like,
Yeah.
play a tune and then there's no reaction. And you're like, well, I hope you liked it. I have no idea if you liked it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
such a
yeah.
strange feeling, man. Yeah.
But for me, in my classes in school and all of my students, I think one of the main issues about teaching and teachers, especially when it comes to um, doing that in higher institutions of higher learning or whatever, there's a standardism. I don't know if that's a word, but
Yeah.
about teacher student that I think has worn its welcome somewhat because the student gets so intimidated by the teacher that it's hard for them to ask questions.
Right.
And if you don't ask questions, you don't learn anything. If I, as a teacher, say, okay, this is how I hold the sticks, and this is my approach to playing this, and here's my book, and if you go to page 37 and practice that, that's a methodology that usually has worked. But what I've noticed, because I've been involved with a whole bunch of conversations with teachers outside of the United States and around the world, and this the teacher student relationship has totally changed, and students are not learning as they did before. And I think it's because they're tuning out because they don't have any real relationship with teachers.
Right. Right.
And the better the relationships that teachers have with students, the more that they can teach them. And I've learned this from teaching not just older students, excuse me, but younger students. Young students don't trust adults.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to find something that you can relate to with the young student. If you find that, then you'll have conversations with them. They'll trust you because you can talk about something that they know about.
Yeah.
They may know more about than you do, and so that they're really excited about that. And so, wow. Then when they trust you, then you can teach them something.
Yeah. It's and what you were just saying, like showing that you're taking an interest in something that they are passionate
Yeah,
about, even if it's
yeah,
not drumming necessarily. Like a student that's into gaming, you can pivot that into, well, the music soundtrack of the game, and then that becomes, oh, I want to play this part of this soundtrack in this game. And you're right, you have to, because otherwise you'll fail them as the teacher, right?
yeah. Well, that's the skill of being a teacher.
Yeah,
A teacher's supposed to give information, whether it's alternative information or information that they know something about. And maybe in the span of an hour, there may be 15 minutes of something that you say that raises their conscious level.
yeah,
And that's what they should attain.
right.
That's what they should keep. But you always have to find something in that hour that does that
Yeah,
for the student. You
yeah,
know?
indeed. By the way, usually like around 30 minutes in, we'll check the chat, but there's definitely a
Sure.
bunch of questions piling up in the chat, which is good. So we'll pull those in shortly. So you do teach privately as well. So you're teaching at the new school, you're teaching at NYU, and then you're teaching privately. So that dynamic, as you were saying, the sort of standardism of teaching in the collegiate atmosphere and then teaching on your own, do you find a preference for one to the other, or not a preference, but a different comfort level? Could you speak to that maybe?
Well, I tell you what happened to me. um, let's start from the beginning. I was asked after Return to Forever. I was asked to do lessons with a lot of people, and I did. And then there was a step up when I was asked to, okay, why don't you come and teach in this uh, little mini institution that we have, and talk about. And I found that it was difficult for me to do that. And what was difficult was the fact that the way that I process music is unique to me, and it was a little hard. And I didn't know how to translate that to a student.
Right.
Marcus Miller has some hilarious stories about him being on some clinics, drum clinics that I did. And a kid would raise his hand and say, Mr. White, how do you do that? And I say, oh yeah, well you just do it like this and like that. Next, and just and it wouldn't translate. It's because how I did it. So I stopped doing it for a while. I stopped teaching. And then I started to see a lot of students that were coming out of certain situations, and I'd ask them about stuff, and nobody ever told them about it. Nobody ever told them what it takes to get from this point to that point. And so then I started to retool what I had to say, and I started to think about how to say it.
Got it.
And when I did that, it actually started to work.
Yeah.
And I was asked, I had a conversation with great drummer and fellow teacher. He teaches at Juilliard and at NYU, Billy Drummond.
Yeah.
And he and I were just talking about stuff. When we get together, we just talk about drums and this and Tony and Elvin and this and all of that. And after having a conversation with him, he called me and he said, hey, listen, man, Daphnis Prieto left NYU and went to Miami, and they need a teacher. Would you be interested? I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. And he said, well, can I have them call you? And I said, yeah, sure. And so Dave Schroeder, who's the head of the jazz part, now he's the head of all music at NYU, called me and said, hey, would you like to come in and talk to me about, I said, yeah, sure. So I came in and we had a conversation. And I said, so Dave, what is it that you want? He said, I want to have working musicians. And I said, do you have a curriculum of how you want that done? He said, no, you could do it any way you want. I said, I'm in.
Yeah, man. Oh my God.
I said, I'm in. And man, I've had some unbelievable students, not just drummers. I've taught guitar players, piano players, violinists,
Oh my God.
all these. And basically, because I just talk about music and playing music and life and how these things coincide, and when they touch and you play and trust musicians, the highest dynamic in society is not love, it's trust.
Yeah.
It's that in God we trust. And when you are on a bandstand with other musicians, you trust them and they trust you, that's when magic happens.
Right. That was a good point, by the way, because there is no love if there's no trust.
That's right.
Can't exist one can't exist without the other.
Without the other. Right.
Oof, man. That's pretty amazing too. Daphne's probably had, his way of doing it, and then you've brought something new to the game there, which is great. I mean, it continues to have that school evolve. Now.
Yeah, everybody has their way of discerning information
Yeah.
and distributing that information. That's what makes us unique.
Right.
And the way that I've processed music all my life, I've now gotten to a point where I can talk about it and compare my perspective to someone else's perspective and compare my perspective to a student's perspective. Because a student has their own perspective, especially when they've come to an institution of higher learning and they've spent a bunch of time lessons with multi teachers
Yeah.
in different situations. So like they should have at least a perspective about how they approach music.
Yeah.
And I can listen to that and talk with them about it and maybe give them an alternative to that.
Yeah. I don't know why, but this just reminded me of Thich Nhat Hanh talked about teaching a young monk that came to him, but the young monk already had all these notions, and he pours the tea into the monk's cup, the young monk, and he keeps pouring, and it's overflowing, and it's going everywhere, and the young monk is like, "What are you doing? You're pouring the tea all over the place." And he said, "Come back to me when you empty your cup," meaning, come back with your thoughts empty, ready to learn something. So do you ever have a student that comes to you that they already think they have everything figured out, and you kind of have to take that approach of like, go empty your cup, and then when you come back, we can begin,
Not really,
Okay.
because I've sat with students and basically, if you ask someone, someone knows you, someone knows that you are very adept in tech things for drummers.
Right.
Someone comes to you and says, okay, and they sit there and expect you to tell them a new tech way to do this or do that. No. The first thing that I would do is say, okay, you're here. What can I teach you?
Right.
So if I'm doing this, pouring the tea, and I say, okay, how much tea do you want? And they say, okay, now this is what I want. Then I can stop pouring the tea.
Right. Right.
So I ask students, what can I help you with? Or what is it that I do that you think can better what it is that you do?
Yeah.
Or is there something that you've seen me do or you've heard me participate in that you think can help you get to another level?
Right.
That's where I start.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to just check the chat real quick. Let's just say
Sure.
we'll say hello to a few people, and then I have to ask you about Jackie McLean, but we'll do a quick check of the chat window, and I'll keep my eye on the clock as well. Let me see
Okay.
what we got here. So I'll bring up the chat next to us. Let's see. Okay, first one in tonight, Bob Sears. Hey, Bob Sears from New Hampshire. Bob is a student of mine, and he's a really nice gentleman. And he's just saying hello. I'm sure he's going to have a question. So Bob Sears saying hi from New Hampshire. My young student Lucia Seminara here, saying hi, Jim and Lenny. How are you guys doing tonight? So everybody's doing the hellos. Dave Lewitt, Lenny is the man. Bob Sears, what was it like playing with Miles? Right out of the gate.
So, what do you want me to answer first?
Yeah. So Bob, just in general, what was it like playing with Miles? Um,
Well, you have to understand. For me, Miles Davis was a hero. Being a young black kid in the ghetto, excuse me, in Jamaica, you know, there was Jim Brown, there was James Brown,
yeah.
there was Jimi Hendrix, there was Muhammad Ali, there was Willie Mays, there was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These were all heroes. And there's Miles Davis and John Coltrane.
Yeah.
See these guys back over here?
Yeah, yeah,
These people
yeah.
I got there. So some people don't get to meet their heroes. I got to meet and play with my hero. So it was a life changing experience.
Yeah.
I kid you not. I mean, um, I had found purpose when I was 17 years old. I listened to an album by Miles Davis called Seven Steps to Heaven. What was unique about that record is I found out that the drummer on that record was 17 when he recorded that record. That drummer was Tony Williams.
Yeah, man.
Immediately, he became my guy because he gave me a purpose. My age was 17 years old, and he was playing with Miles Davis. Are you kidding? So it gave me a purpose. It gave
Yeah.
me a direction, an arc. That's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to be good enough to play with Miles Davis.
Wow.
So if you know what my goal was when you asked me a question, what was it like playing with Miles Davis? I don't know. I can't I can't put it into words. Words are not enough.
Right.
Excuse me, about that experience. But that experience is still lasting.
Yeah.
It gave me a perspective on playing music from that point to where I am now, uh, and where I can go. I mean, it hasn't worn off.
And speaking of like people that pivot, I mean, that record was pivotal, right? That was a turning point too for Miles, like in his composing and
I mean, you know, it was interesting because um, when I did the record was done in August of 1969. Excuse me. In October, I was going to New York Institute of Technology as a painter. I was going for commercial art,
right.
and so when I had done that, I went. It was August when we recorded, and I went back to school in September. My classmates were saying, "Man, what are you doing here, man? You recorded with Miles Davis. Why are you back in school? What's up?" And in October, I, true story, I woke up out of a dead sleep and said, "I recorded with Miles Davis."
Wow. Oh my God.
Because what had happened at that point, I knew that, people say, "Oh, yeah, I played with Miles Davis, man. He came into a club one night, man, and I sat in with him and I played, and nobody was there. Nobody, that's not real to everybody.
Right.
But what was real to everybody was there was a documentation that I had played with Miles Davis, and I used to write my name on the back of album covers. And on this album cover, my name was on the back of it. I didn't have to write my name. This was real. And this was for the rest of the history of the world. That documentation would be there to know that I, Lenny White from Jamaica, Queens, played with Miles Davis. So that was, and
Oh
that's
my
still
God.
lasting. So
It's
when
still like,
you ask me, you know, that's still going on, man. It's still going on.
oh my God. That's amazing. And by the way, just that you mentioned that you wrote your name on records prior to that, that's almost trying to, it's like people that do vision boards, right? It's like trying to see the future,
Manifest. It's trying to see it before it happens.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it will manifest and it'll happen.
Yeah. It's like you were
So
putting it out there in the universe and the universe
yes,
answered in a
yes,
big way.
yes.
Oh my God. Um, let's get a couple more people before we jump back in this story. Let's see. Lindsay McDonald. He said, "Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lenny." Anthony Cusina, greetings, gentlemen. Lucia, she said, "Oh, check that out." She said, "Can you please speak about playing with Jackie McLean?" And I was going to ask you about how that came to be in your very early. You were very young when you began to play with Jackie.
Yes, I was. I had gotten a call, and it was Jackie McLean, and he asked me to come do this gig with him. And I'm still going to school, and my dad, who was a huge jazz fan, I mean, like my parents really championed me being a musician. They bought me my first drum kit, and they played jazz music around the house all the time. So like it was there. I mean,
Yeah.
And so Jackie McLean called me. He had heard about me, and he called me to do this gig at a club called the Gold Lounge up in Harlem on 23rd Street. I'm going to school. I mean, I'm still in high school, so my dad has to drive me in to the club. So he drives me into the club, and in that band that Jackie had, he had Scotty Holt on bass, Harold Mayburn was playing piano, and Woody Shaw was playing trumpet.
Wow.
And I had never met Jackie before, and he called a tune that I didn't know. He called Bigfoot, and he said 1, 2, and that was it. That's how I got on the gig.
That was your intro to the. Oh
That was
man,
my intro to the gig. That's what it is.
I guess you did all right.
Well, see, I think what I would say to all young musicians is that it's not about luck, it's about being prepared. If you practice, if you do research, and you stay as prepared as you can be, then what happens is you're given an opportunity. And because you prepared for whatever opportunity that is, that's how you get to do that gig
Right.
or to play in that band or to, if you're a composer, to write for that particular situation. You have to be prepared. So practicing is preparing yourself
Right.
for the opportunities that come from being prepared.
Right. That quote, luck is when preparedness meets opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, very excellent. Well, that I mean, what an amazing start for you. You know, at a I mean, I guess you had been playing for a bit already that he heard about you around town, right?
Yes. I mean, and what the interesting thing was, remember I had said that I had heard Seven Steps to Heaven.
Right.
And so what's in my mindset is now for me to play with Miles Davis. So when I started playing with Jackie McLean, people come to me and say, "Oh man, you playing with Jackie? Oh, you gonna play with Miles next, man?" Because Jack DeJohnette played with Jackie McLean, and then he went on and played with Miles. Tony Williams played with Jackie McLean. So everybody said, "Oh man, you played with Jackie McLean? You gonna play with Miles next?" And I was like, "Yeah, right." But it manifested. That's
Oh my
actually
God.
what happened.
Did Jackie recommend you to Miles, or did it just happen organically in a different way?
Well, unfortunately, they are not alive right now.
Right. Right.
Jackie, Wallace Roney, or Tony.
Yeah.
But Tony Williams is responsible for me playing on my first two records. Miles and Tony had a falling out, and Tony had suggested that I do Bitches Brew.
Wow. Oh my God.
And then Freddie Hubbard had called Tony to do Red Clay. And because Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, and Tony Williams was doing everybody's records as a rhythm section,
Right.
and Miles was kind of ticked about that, they decided that they were not going to do everybody's records as rhythm sections. And so Tony suggested me to play on Red Clay. And that's
Wow.
how I got too. So
Oh my God. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that part of the story.
yeah.
Wow. And you know, Jackie, I came to really know about him, Jack McLean's Dynasty, with
Mm-hmm.
Carl Allen. It's like Nat Reeves, Carl Allen, Idris Hotep,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
piano
Mm-hmm.
player. And I bought that VHS tape and then started going back and looking at the whole history. Isn't it funny how like, you know, now every kid just goes and Googles it and goes to Wikipedia and it's like bang,
That's unbelievable, right?
they got the whole thing. And like I was in Titus Oaks record store on Avenue U in Brooklyn, looking on the back of the record cover, going like, oh, who played drums on that record? Oh, and then going to another record and picking up that one and going, oh, he played on this record too.
Jim, that's a lost art.
I know.
You see, what's interesting is that lineage. That's what excuse me. That's what kept us really, really connected to the music
Right.
and educated about the music because we had LPs that had a bunch of information on the back that you could purchase. Purchase. When you take your hard earned money that you've acquired from your paper route,
Right.
or the allowance that you've gotten that your parents gave you, or whatever work at the grocery store or whatever that you've done, and you saved it up to purchase this music that you're going to get that was yours, and you went and physically paid and took and owned something that you took home.
Right. It was tangible.
That's invaluable.
Yeah. Remember, like, because it would be an event. You bring a record home, you'd open
Of
it up,
course.
you pull out that sleeve, and then read everything on the sleeve. Your friends would come over. You'd listen to the whole record, like from beginning to end. It was like an event. Yeah.
That was the experience of music. Now you take that, what you just said. Now let's amp it up to the guy's record that you bought is coming to your town.
Right.
That's going to be in your club.
Indeed.
And you go and you hear live what you heard on that record.
Yep.
And then the experience that you get from experiencing that, you can't talk about it now.
Yeah.
Because those kinds of things are not the same.
Yeah.
Now you purchase a subscription, and what they say to you, hey man, but look, you got 10 million records. You can get any record that you want. You can hear any record that you want, but you can't own it.
Right.
But you can hear any record that you want.
Yeah, man. I mean,
but I don't know if you could look at the liner notes of it.
I was about to say, like, how do you, people don't even know how to find the liner notes, even if they wanted to. But the problem is, most kids don't even care to see the liner notes.
This is what happened to me.
Okay.
A while back. I don't know, maybe now it's been maybe a year and a half. So I went online because I wanted to purchase Romantic Warrior. Do you know I couldn't find it?
What?
Because it was a part of a compilation.
Oh.
To me that there's a rite of passage that came with that search, and it's taken away.
Yeah.
It's taken away. It's not the same experience as it was for me in my generation.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, I try to, at least from the listening perspective with students, we do a lot of listening to music with my drum students. Even if it's on a Zoom call, I'm playing them stuff, going, listen to this. Let's go back. Before that record came out, this record, and just going back. I love going, down that rabbit hole.
You know about the lineage. Yeah, you know about the lineage. And that's what they need to learn. They need to learn about lineage. They shouldn't just think about somebody's skill set that is a skill set that's created around the things that are hip right now.
Right. Right.
Because it's not enough of a far-reaching skill set.
Yeah. And I always say, I always say you can't know where you're going until you know where you've
been. Exactly.
So it's like you gotta go back to go forward.
That's right. That's right.
Dave Clive from Dave Clive's Gretsch Museum in Brooklyn, saying greetings, Lenny and Jim, from Dave Clive's Gretsch Museum. Please thank Lenny.
I need to come there. I need to come and check out his Gretsch Museum, baby.
He's got a collection. Series collection.
I'm quite sure he does.
Some really rare stuff. Uh, but he says, please thank Lenny for many years of musical inspiration. He was a huge Return to Forever fan and Lenny's solo albums, etc. I saw you most recently at the Cutting Room for the Cindy Blackman show.
Oh yeah,
And I
yeah,
was
yeah.
talking with you and Mike Clark. Very cool, very cool. Yeah, man. So, in fact, uh, briefly, very briefly, he had a funny story because Cindy Blackman was saying that she owned the oldest, Gretsch kit, and Dave, he's got the oldest Gretsch kit in his collection. It's pretty insane. But yeah, you should check out his drums. And by the way, and he said, hip hop classical timpani part, awesome.
No,
So,
no, no, no. Yeah, when you hear it, you're gonna say, "Wow!" It's good, man. It's really good,
yeah, yeah.
really good.
By the
You
way,
know,
what is your device or instrument for composition when you're doing these orchestral pieces and stuff? What are you writing from?
Logic Audio.
Okay, and
Yep.
like on a synth, on a keyboard rather.
Keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Nice,
I have 5 different orchestras
sweet.
that I've compiled that have different, you know. So if my first violin comes from this orchestra, the second violin comes from a different orchestra, so that like the texture is different, and so I can recreate a live orchestra.
Is this some
I mean,
sample collections?
say it again.
Excuse me. Was that like sample collections?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Nice,
Hmm.
awesome. Oh man, I can't wait to hear that music. Um, and there is a debut coming up, right?
Well, I mean, I just had one. It was
Right.
April 4th, and the second part of the piece, I'm in the process of uh, orchestrating it now, and I don't know. I guess I should talk about it possibly. But in 2023, um, I have a possibility of having some pieces done with the Copenhagen Orchestra,
Wow.
and also my dear friend and fellow colleague, Mr. Clark, and I are talking about possibly doing our tribute to Chick
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
from the perspective. Well, there's 2 things. There's something that's going to happen, I think, next year out in San Francisco, and then we're thinking about taking that music, the music of Return to Forever, and doing it with different orchestras around the world.
Oh my
So,
God, that would be amazing. Um, yeah, and showing that perspective and the early.
well, that music was always orchestrated. Chick orchestrated it to the point where it was just the 4 of us. But if you open that stuff up and hear it with string section, brass,
Yeah.
woodwinds, impressive, man.
Oh my God.
It's very impressive.
Oh man. Do you see that being guest artist or anything like that potentially, or just always be the core, the original core 4 of you? And who would be playing Chick's part? Because I'll tell you, man, Jeffrey Keezer was playing the other night at Lincoln Center, and he did a wonderful job. And Renee Rosnes played,
I'm quite sure all of that
and Herbie
was
crashed the party, so Herbie came out and played.
then. I'm quite sure it was amazing. I'm
Yeah.
quite sure it was
So
amazing.
who do you think would be your chick?
There's nobody that could replace Chip.
No, no, of course not.
And see, I don't think that's the way to approach it.
So rhythm section, orchestra.
I've given too much information. Sorry.
Gotta reel it back, Jim.
I thought, yeah, come on, Rick, come on, Jim. I'm giving up too much
Yeah,
information right
yeah.
here.
I'm too excited, man.
I gotta leave something open for
Yeah,
people
yeah.
to say, well, what are they gonna do?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, how are they gonna do that?
Indeed,
Well, what do you
indeed.
mean? You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a good lesson. I say this every single pod stream, but everybody out there, go see everybody that you are inspired by or want to see their music, because
Most definitely, because you learn something in everything that you see and everything that you hear.
yeah, and they're not going to be there forever. So
That's
go
right.
see them while we have them. Indeed. All right. So thanks, Dave Clive, for the questions. Dave Clive's a good friend of mine. Let's
Thanks, Dave.
see. Uh, Lindsay, he says, Lenny's been teaching a long time. I was lucky enough to take lessons with him many years ago at Drummers Collective.
Oh, yeah, I'm better now.
Well, that was part of, part of the journey, right?
That's right. That's part of the arc.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
part of
man.
the arc.
Yeah,
You know?
indeed. I studied at Drummers Collective with Kim Plainfield.
Oh
rest in
yeah,
peace.
I know Kim.
Kim
Yeah.
was great, and briefly with Marvin Smitty Smith,
Oh
uh,
yeah. Oh yeah.
who kicked my butt and gave me a lot of work to do. And I went away for about a month before I went back to see him again. But that was super fun. But yeah, Drummers Collective, it's kind of a thing of the past, sort of now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And let's see, Anthony Cucina. So what is your focus in today's music?
In today's music,
Yeah. So
well,
he's asking, the way he worded it was, "Hi Lenny, would you please talk about your purpose in today's music?" Um,
I think purposes change
yeah.
just as music changes,
Yep.
just as perceptions and um, how look music how music is created has changed.
Yeah. Indeed.
So I think what you have to do is you have to think about all of this being a lineage so that you just don't think about today's music. I think the 21st century musician should have three perspectives. The 21st century musician needs to make music that shows where music came from, what music is like in its present form, and how music in its present form and what it has been can be put together to create what music should sound like in the future.
Yeah.
I think that that's really an important perspective and goal that all 21st century musicians should have.
Yeah, man. That's a great way to look at it. I recently had Adam Deitch on the show,
Yeah,
with the band, Lettuce, and
I know Adam. I mean, and his mother's a good drummer too.
yeah, his parents,
Yes, sir.
both his
Yeah, yeah,
parents
yeah.
came in on the podcast. So
Yeah.
at one point, it was Devin from Dumpster Funk, it was Adam, it was Bobby Deitch, and
Yep.
Adam's mom were all on the podcast together.
Yeah.
And we were talking music, and they were talking about how they have the rudiments posted all around their kitchen, and they have practice pads, so they're all like practicing drums in the kitchen. But I thought Adam is a great example of bringing the past into the now and then heading into the future, because he really is paying homage to, all the early funk and rhythm and soul, and
Sure.
and then kind of spinning some really interesting perspective on where they're going with groove.
But Jim, you got to understand, for real, real talk,
Yeah,
truth. It doesn't change.
right.
there's the perception that things change. That's not the case.
Yeah.
Um, if you're Miles Davis was he had a music encyclopedia in his brain. And although everybody says, well, Miles never looked back, that's impossible for you not to look back and create the music that he created.
Right.
I mean, he had to have listened to Ravel, Stravinsky, along with Charlie Parker
Right.
and Count Basie and Billy Eckstine and Prince.
Right.
He's the only musician that I know of that played with Charlie Parker and Prince.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah.
So it's how you place it, and I think that that's the thing that makes musicians that I feel inspired from is how they are able to have call and response. They go back and call Ravel, and the response is Wayne Shorter,
Wow.
Miles, Jimmy, you know, James Brown. All of these things. I mean, they use the same notes, Jim. I mean,
Right.
a C is a C.
Yeah. Yeah.
The permutations that you have are endless, but they are parts of the same things.
Yeah.
And I think the test and the real game, if you will, is how can I juxtaposition this? How can I change that? And when you're able to do that, somebody says, "Man, what is that thing that you played there?" And you say, "Oh no, that's just a Swiss triplet." No, 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 no. The thing that it's a Swiss triplet.
Right.
What do you mean by that? I don't start on one.
Yeah.
Swiss triplet starts on two, and the way that you hear it, it sounds like it's another thing. It sounds like it's an element. It's an element until you are able to recognize it, and then it becomes the rudiment that you couldn't hear before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great analogy. Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true, all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, cool. Joe Elliott saying hello. Thanks for hanging, Joe. Joe and I go way back. We were in junior high school
Oh,
when we heard that John Bonham had passed. And I remember both of us being really upset about that because we'd only just discovered him pretty much, like pretty young. Um,
I got to tell you a story about John Bonham.
oh, yeah.
When I discovered Led Zeppelin, Black Dog was my tune. I mean,
You did an amazing
love.
cover of that, by the way.
Well, we kind of did a little
Swung it.
things, yeah, 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 yeah. But so he's one of my guys that I patterned my playing after. And, Led Zeppelin was, one of my bands, man. And then I started to really get into Led Zeppelin. And so from um, Black Dog, I started listening to other stuff. And then In My Time of Dying became my new joint. That
Yeah.
was my stuff. And so I was out in LA, this is years ago, and I was at Professional Percussion, on Vine, whatever, the drum shop.
Drum shop, yeah.
And there's a book on the counter that was John Bonham doing interviews about various songs that he had recorded with Led Zeppelin. And I said, "Oh wow, man, yeah." So I go to In My Time of Dying, and I read the text about what he was talking about. And he says, by this time, we had started to listen to more progressive music. And I was listening to Tony Williams, Lenny White, and Alphonse Mouzon.
Wow. Oh my God.
And my mouth said, whoa.
Just hit the floor.
I mean, because I had been listening to this guy, and then he's talking about listening to me with, my contemporaries. But that just goes to show you what I was saying. It's like you take something from somebody that plays this type of music this way, and you like it, and you say, man, I could take some of that and I could incorporate it in what it is that I do,
Right.
and it makes me hear something totally different. Man, when I went to I spent a lot of time in San Francisco with my stick people buddies,
Yeah, man.
and when I heard Mike and Dave do this thing with the 16th note, and I said, man, that's some badass stuff, man. Let me see how I can. And I was coming from the East Coast, so nobody on the East Coast was playing like that. And I'd come back here with that. They said, man, what is that you're doing? You know. So you find, you know, this, and you put it in your fabric, and you create your tapestry
Right.
in what it is that you do. That's why you have to listen to everybody all the time, because you can learn something from everybody. Don't just listen to supposedly the hip cats.
Right.
No, you got to listen to everybody in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Oh my goodness. Um, let's see. We got Larry Rizzo. Jim Payne is in here, by the way, saying, "Hey, Lenny, JT, great stuff." Jim Payne, funky drummer. I'm helping him on his School of Jazz right now.
Oh,
Um,
cool, cool.
yeah, he's a good guy. Larry Rizzo. Hey, Jim. Hey, Lenny. Hey, everyone in Jim Toscano land. Okay. Let's see. Oh my God. Let's see. Questions. Okay. Lindsay said, Lenny, thanks for all you do and all the music over the years. Can you talk a little bit about playing all those jaw dropping performances with Chick Corea? So that's pretty broad, but
Well, I can say this. That's a great loss for all of us.
yeah,
Um, but what is very interesting is that Chick was so prolific. We could be listening to, for our ears, new Chick Corea music for the next 4 or 5 years.
yeah,
I mean, he was so prolific, and for me, it was a great learning experience playing with that band,
yeah,
because a Chick was new at being a leader, and so he was learning and expanding as a leader, and he gave us all opportunities to grow as men and as musicians, as composers. I mean, it's very an interesting perspective to be in a band with one of the greatest composers of the 20th century, and that composer says to you, "Yeah, come on, write some music."
yeah,
And so, you know, that was a real big goal, to be able to write music that not competes, but is in that same canon of that return to forever music.
yeah. It's
So it was
interesting.
it was a
Everybody,
great challenge.
Yeah, and everybody coming out of that band was writing afterwards. I mean, maybe before too as well, but I would think that there was seeds were planted, in
Yes, yes. We learned about ourselves
yeah,
because we were tested. We were taken out of our comfort zones and put in situations where we needed to be prepared.
yeah,
And you have to rise to the occasion. And I think that we did that quite well as a group, and we you know made music and created experiences that were learning and rewarding experiences.
yeah,
And Chick gave us the opportunity to do that.
yeah. Speaking about him being so prolific, I know that in the last several years before he had passed, he was doing, I mean, and he was probably doing this all along, but he was doing a lot of collaboration with different people and sending them a little piece of music, and then they would send him something back, and they would go back and forth, basically, remote sessions, just creating stuff. And, I'd spoken to a lot of people that were doing that, including Gary Husband had mentioned doing some of that as well. And man, like right until the end, I would imagine he was writing as much as he could, you know,
uh yes, he was. Yeah.
and and I would imagine that I don't know, if his wife will see to it that eventually that all gets released. I don't know, but it would be amazing for the world to hear some of those later things, that are.
Well, some of those things are coming out. I do believe. um so I think that you'll be hearing from Chick Corea for a long time.
Right, right. Yeah, man. I mean, definitely one of the most uh, interesting journeys of a musician, I think, to listen to the whole, starting from the beginning of his discography and really going through it and listening to that journey. It's pretty amazing. Every record really changing, um, subtle changes from year to year, but over decades, really incredible changes, right? And then all
Well,
the,
you would hope that that's what would happen.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. You would hope. Yeah, indeed. Um,
Chick was a true artist. I mean, like true artists are restless in how their viewpoint changes.
yeah,
And I don't think that they're that interested in doing something that they've done that was successful and continue to do that for the rest of their lives.
right.
I don't, I think, as I said, a life is an arc.
Yeah,
And, you know, I think the back end of the arc is when you don't exist anymore.
right.
But it's always a climb, it's always doing this. And if you're true to being an artist, then um, you create and you're a magnet to people that learn from you or like what it is you do, attached to what it is that you do, and they'll go with you.
Yeah.
You don't have to search for them. So,
It's pretty remarkable. There's like two little families that I want to discuss. One is drummers in general. We tend to be very supportive of one another, and we kind of, I say this every podcast, but we tend to be this weird extended family, that we can come together and talk about what we do, and really nerd out on everybody's different skill sets and different genres of music, um, and we have, like PASIC. We go to conventions and all the drummers get together. I feel like other instruments don't really do that. I always make the joke that there's no bassoon players getting together at a convention center to like discuss drums. But then the other interesting family marriage, if you will, is like bass players and drummers. And you've really, man, like had that relationship since almost the very beginning, right, of your career. in a really remarkable way. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yes, I mean, fortunately for me, I've been put into some great non-compromising musical situations with great bass players, and um, they've continued this long. Um, my relationships with Stanley Clark, with Ron Carter, with Buster Williams, with Marcus Miller, and with Victor Bailey. But Victor Bailey's ended because he's no longer with us.
Right.
But my relationships musically with those other four individuals are still ongoing relationships. And, I think that there's a real great symbiotic relationship between the bottom. And I think that that's what translates. Although melody, I mean, there's the perspective that melody is king. Mm, mm, because how the music really translates is the bottom.
Yeah.
Um, and especially nowadays, I mean, with the music changing the way it's changed and the perspective being this popular music of hip hop being the thing that is a worldwide perspective that's
Yeah.
given this music a worldwide perspective because it has rhythm and words. Um, but from that true symbiotic relationship between the bottom, the bass, and the drums, I mean, that's a valuable, one of the most valuable perspectives, and it is the way that music translates around the world.
Yeah.
It used to be, like back in the 17, 18, 1900s, until, I mean, it was orchestras,
Right.
and then there became jazz bands. There was dance music and bebop, jazz, rock, hip hop. So these things change. Now, not taking anything away from the melody, but rhythm became the way that this music really translated to people
Yeah.
all around the world.
It's like rhythm is the vehicle to deliver it.
Exactly.
you know, it's like even if you listen to like the Rite of Spring, you listen to Stravinsky. All those sections where it's heavy percussion. Dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 dun. It's like as if Stravinsky could have written on a drum set, he probably would have.
Well, there's a very interesting story that's been told. Igor Stravinsky, Igor Stravinsky, and he had heard about this jazz musician that was so remarkable, and so he came to see Charlie Parker. Now, Charlie Parker supposedly used to carry text of Firebird in his back pocket. So
Wow.
Stravinsky came to see him, and they were playing um, on the Honeysuckle Rose or one tune at a breakneck speed. And so Stravinsky's there watching Charlie Parker play, and in his second chorus, he quotes Firebird, and Stravinsky totally lost it.
Wow.
He couldn't believe that somebody could improvise like this and then incorporate some of the music that he had written in his solo, and like this was a legendary thing that was talked about. People saw Stravinsky, and like Stravinsky just lost it. He couldn't believe that something like that had happened.
Oh
You
my
know.
God. It's funny. I had Sperry Karas on the show, um, big band jazz drummer in Germany, and he talked about the same story, and about Stravinsky also being supposedly kind of enamored with the drum set because it was
Well,
something
yeah.
completely
I
different.
don't know if he told you this, but do you know who two of Stravinsky's favorite musicians were?
Did not tell me that. What is that?
Richard Davis, great bass player,
Yeah.
and Art Blakey.
What? Oh, that's amazing.
Art Blakey's press roll, Stravinsky was enamored with that.
Oh, wow.
So
See,
see,
you learn something.
it goes all crosses. It crosses.
Yeah.
It's not these musicians, these musicians. No,
Yeah. It's true. It's like language. I mean,
right. Language has that different dialects,
that's it. Different dialects.
but it's language, you know.
Yeah. Oh my
And
God.
music is a language. So
Yeah, indeed. Um, I'm just trying to watch. I watch our time. Keep us.
yep,
Yeah, yeah. I got a couple other questions,
sure.
which I didn't get. I have one that I have to ask about a specific tune in a moment, but let me just see. So John Gill saying thanks for all the music and inspiration. John Gill's from Oneonta, New York.
Thank you, John.
Stephen Kramer saying the great Lenny White. I was just listening to Passing Ships this morning. Very
Wow,
cool.
wow, Steve, that's pretty deep, man. Um, Ron Carter saved my butt on that record, man.
How so?
Well, that record was the second record that I made. That record was actually before I did Red Clay, and Ron played on that too. And I just was like, you know, in a deer in headlights, and he kept me focused,
Wow.
and it was great. I mean, Ron did that in a lot of different ways. And then a record that I did after Red Clay was Blackstone Legacy, which is Woody Shaw's record that Ron played on also. And so Ron has been with me from the beginning. He's helped me from the beginning.
There's those relationships, man, being like
Yeah.
paramount.
Yes.
Wow, very cool. By the way, I had music queued up to introduce you with, and I forgot to hit the cue. But it's funny because I went to I put up election day because I was looking for something like kind of just driving to like bring it in. So like I had it queued up to this point, so I'm gonna hit it. It might be a little loud, but I'm gonna hit it. So this was when I was gonna say, tonight we have Lenny White, and then I was hitting this
Okay.
to that part, right,
Right.
as an intro. But man, there's so much great music. And heard something that you played, and I had to ask you about it. So on Kenny Garrett's album, you
The
do
new
this.
one?
There's this 5/4 like thing on it that you're playing.
Snare drum thing?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's on the album and Ancestors, right?
Yeah.
And there's this like 5/4 groove that's really interesting and has this sort of geometric feel. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's got a really interesting placement of the snare, and the overall feel. It's almost got a slight shuffliness to it. Do you know what tune I'm talking about?
Yes, but I haven't heard it since I played it.
I kind of figured that. I'll probably get like I wonder if this would shut down my stream. No, I won't. um, yeah, I'm gonna watch this.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Um, what was interesting, so this is from 2021,
Yeah.
and the tune. Why did I write down the name of the tune? It was for. These are different. Let's see if this is the one. I know what you were talking. You were talking about "Soldiers of the Fields," which had like double drumming on it. You overdubbed like marching.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the one.
yeah, yeah. That was
Yeah.
cool. Wait, let me see if it's this one.
I think that's Ronald playing on that one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck is that?
Yeah, but that evens itself out.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah,
It's,
totally.
it evens itself out to before.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's very interesting, man.
it's like Gazelle. You know, Joe Henderson's Gazelle.
Right, right, right.
How he taught it to me was a bar of 7 and 3 bars of 3.
Oh, okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3.
Yeah,
But actually, it's just 4.
yeah.
Da 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 da. It's just 4.
But it's a smart way to look at it because, to learn the phrase, it's good to see
Yeah.
those component, chunks. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Nice, man. Ah, that's so cool. And I mean, the one that you were talking about, this. So you got the marching snare over on the right. Man. Yeah, it's just killing, man. And there's a couple of really nice Latin feels on that record that you played. So anyway, people, go check out that record too. Peter Retzlaff is in the house, hanging. Peter Retzlaff, great.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah, do you know Pete?
I do now.
You do now. Pete was teaching in the jazz department at Drummers Collective. Great drummer. I won't say jazz drummer because he's a great all-around drummer, but he lives in Brooklyn. And yeah, glad you're hanging with us, Pete. And my mom's here. What?
Yo.
So my mom's saying, "Hi, Jim. Hi, Lenny." I always like.
Hi, Mom.
I always say, when I was a kid, she worked nights at Kings County she was a nurse in Kings County in Brooklyn, and she worked nights. So during the day, she would sleep, and she could sleep knowing that I was downstairs playing the drums because she could hear the drums in the house. She knew I was safe. I was home. Yeah, so I always mention that. Yeah, yeah.
So, Jim.
Thanks for taking the time. I had probably only 90 or 100 more questions, but it's all good. And who knows, maybe one day down the road we'll do it again. Everybody should check out Stick People because you guys are doing some great interviews and great hangs. And you can, if you follow Stick People on Instagram, you can find out about all the stuff that's going on. But Greg Arico, David Garibaldi, Lenny White, Mike Clark, such a great thing. And
Mike Shreve.
And Mike Shreve.
Yeah.
And also, Lenny teaches. So, you can find him. You can find him. You just go on the internet, look up Lenny White. You'll find out where he's at. But if somebody wanted to book lessons with you, what is the best way to go about it?
Probably if you go to my Facebook
Yeah.
page. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think I put a link to your Facebook page in the description of the video. So
Okay.
everybody go check that out. And Lenny has a whole bunch of solo albums that you really need to listen to if you've not heard them. There's a lot of great music going back to the very beginnings, but definitely check it out. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I appreciate it. I know that our listeners definitely appreciated it. And yeah, man.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for doing it. I'm going to hit the
It's been great.
credits, and we'll see everybody next week with Bernard Purdy. All right.
Pretty